Have you ever felt your heart beat faster in the middle of a heated conversation? Not from fear, but from the sheer futility of it all. You speak, they interrupt. You explain, they twist your words. And when it's over, nothing's resolved, except for the ache in your chest and the lingering regret of saying too much. After the age of 60, these arguments don't just sting, they drain you, not just emotionally. They erode your peace, exhaust your energy, and leave your spirit tangled in battles that should have been walked away from. Let me ask you gently, at this point in life, do you truly need to be right, or would you rather be free? Growing older comes with gifts we rarely recognize. The gift of perspective, the power of restraint, the right to walk away without guilt. And yet, many elders still fall into the trap of arguments, with their children, with neighbors, with the world. Why? Because deep down, we all want to be heard, to be understood, to be respected. But here's what Stoic wisdom and life experience both whisper to us. You do not need to prove your worth with words. You do not need to explain your every decision. You do not need to defend your past, your values, or your boundaries. And above all, you do not need to argue to be seen. Yet in this video, we'll explore a life-changing idea. Why the wisest thing you can do after 60 is to never argue. We'll look at this not as passive silence, but as a powerful Stoic practice, a path of clarity, dignity, and deep emotional mastery. You'll discover why arguing is often a game you lose by playing, how choosing silence protects your peace and amplifies your presence, what to say or not say when people try to pull you into confrontation, and how this quiet strength can improve your relationships, your health, and your legacy. Because the truth is, the older we get, the more precious our time, our calm, and our energy become. You no longer owe explanations to everyone. You owe yourself a peaceful mind and a purposeful heart. So stay with me. By the end of this video, you may just find that the most powerful voice is the one that doesn't shout, doesn't argue, but simply stands firm in stillness. Let's begin. Part 1. Arguing is a trap that steals your inner peace. There's something that aging gives us if we're awake enough to notice it. It's the power to choose our battles. But here's the truth. Most of the arguments we've fallen into over the years weren't really chosen at all. They were traps. Traps set by a careless insult, a cold tone, or a subtle provocation that seemed harmless at first. And every time you react, every time you step into the ring, you lose the most precious gift that age can preserve, your composure. Arguing feels powerful. I need to speak up. I won't let them walk over me. But the reality lies beneath the surface of that reaction. Every time you argue, you step into someone else's world. You accept the frame they've set, the emotional battlefield where reason no longer referees, but dances like a puppet pulled by ego, pride, and insecurity. Yes, your logic may be flawless, but you still lose. In image, in energy, in emotional control, you feel drained, frustrated, thrown off center, and worse still, you've exposed the very thing you were trying to protect, your inner stillness. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, once wrote, "If someone is mistaken, their mistake is punishment enough. You don't need to fix everything. You don't need to argue to defend the truth, because the more you argue, the deeper you sink into a space where you are no longer the master." Those who understand real power in politics, business, or even daily life know this truth well. Stillness is the strongest frame. When you don't react quickly, others must slow down to meet your pace. When you don't respond right away, others are left to wrestle with the discomfort of their own silence. And in that moment, you hold the room without ever raising your voice. Especially after the age of 60, when time is no longer in excess and energy is not to be wasted, arguing becomes a dangerous luxury. It steals your steady heartbeat, It robs you of a peaceful meal. It turns an ordinary day, one that could have been serene, into a battlefield. And most importantly, it lowers your position from someone respected to someone easily provoked. Older people should avoid arguing, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom, because by now you know, calm is the highest form of strength. You have nothing left to prove. No one's opinion defines your worth, and certainly not the outcome of a loud, messy exchange. You only need one thing: inner sovereignty. A wise elder walks away from an argument, not because they've lost, but because they've already won. They've won over themselves. Part 2. Arguing doesn't convince anyone. There's a common illusion many people carry with them throughout life, especially those who've weathered many seasons, that if you just present your logic clearly enough, others will understand. But have you noticed something? Very few people change their minds because they were convinced in an argument. In fact, the more they are proven wrong, the more stubbornly they cling to their old beliefs. Why? Because human beings do not operate by logic alone. We operate through ego, through emotion, through beliefs that have become personal extensions of our identity. When you tell someone they're wrong, even if you're right, their ego feels attacked. In that moment, they're not listening to you. They're listening to the sting of their own pride. The sharper your words, the more defensive they become. The more you prove, the more they resist. Because in that moment, they don't want truth. They want to save face. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus once said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our view of them." So when we see someone saying something false, instead of getting angry or argumentative, we might pause and recognize. They too are just a soul reacting from emotion, just as we have done many times before. Often, the urge to correct someone isn't about helping them grow. It's about wanting to be seen as right. Think back for a moment. How many arguments have you walked away from feeling truly heard, where the other person genuinely changed their mind? Rare. Very rare. But how many arguments have left behind bruised relationships, an awkward dinner, or an exhausting day? Surely far more. Real persuasion doesn't come from words. It comes from presence, from consistency, from being a living example of what you believe. When you live your values quietly, without preaching, you spark reflection in others. And in that silence, true change may begin. After the age of 60, people won't remember the debates you won. They'll remember how you made them feel. So remember this: don't argue. Not because you lack the intellect to reason, but because you possess the wisdom to know that logic cannot penetrate a heart in defense mode. When you remain calm, when you refuse to be baited into debate, you leave the other person face to face with their own emotion. And sometimes that silence becomes the deepest teacher. Part 3. Silence as strategic strength. There is a kind of strength that makes no noise, it doesn't boast, it seeks no applause, and yet it commands the deepest respect. That strength is silence. Not the silence of weakness or resignation, but the deliberate silence of someone who knows they don't need to draw their sword to prove they have one. Like a seasoned warrior who keeps his blade sheathed, not out of fear, but because he understands the battle isn't worth it. In our youth, we often believe that speaking up, debating fiercely, and making our stance known is a sign of strength. But after 60, after you've survived your share of pointless arguments and battles with no real victors, you begin to realize something powerful. The strongest person in the room is often the one who doesn't need to speak. In any confrontation, the one who talks too much reveals themselves first. They reveal their emotions. They reveal their boundaries. They reveal their weaknesses. But the one who holds their silence, they hold the high ground. Why? Because they maintain control. They refuse to be dragged into the emotional arena set by someone else. They give nothing away, forcing the other person to wrestle with their own assumptions, their own emotions, their own uncertainty. And that uncertainty is powerful. It makes others uneasy. What is he thinking? Is she upset? Did I go too far? And in that quiet tension, you've already shifted the balance without lifting a finger. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "True strength lies in calmness. The calmer you are, the less the world controls you." In today's world, where everyone is quick to speak, quick to argue, quick to defend their ego, silence has become a rare and precious force. It is your invisible armor, a shield against unnecessary battles, a way to guard your peace in a world addicted to noise. Silence is not apathy, it's higher wisdom. When you choose silence, you're not rejecting truth. You're simply refusing to fight for the sake of pride. You're saving your energy for things that truly matter: a peaceful meal, a quiet afternoon breeze, a genuine moment of laughter. When others raise their voices, you don't need to match their volume. Your calm gaze already sends the message, "I'm not playing that game." And sometimes that's all it takes to extinguish a fire before it spreads. After 60, your health isn't what it used to be. Every breath, every morning, every conversation, they are precious. So ask yourself, is this argument worth sacrificing my inner peace for? If the answer is no, then smile and walk away. No need for a closing remark. No need for victory. Because the truly strong aren't those who always win the debate. They are the ones who can endure misunderstanding without losing their serenity. Part 4. The wise avoid emotional traps. There is a truth that grows clearer with age. Not every battle deserves your sword, and not every provocation deserves your attention. Especially after 60, when your time is more valuable, your peace more fragile, and your energy more sacred. You must be very selective about what and whom you give yourself to. Because some people, knowingly or not, are traps in human form. Not because they are evil, but because they are ruled by chaos. They seek reaction, not resolution. They crave drama, not dialogue. And when you engage with them, you don't win. You simply step into a storm that never had a center. Think of that neighbor who always complains, that relative who always criticizes, that acquaintance who lives to stir conflict. What do they really want? To be understood? Maybe. But more often, they want control. And how do they gain it? By baiting your emotions. The moment you take the bait, raise your voice, defend yourself, set the record straight, you are no longer leading the conversation. You're dancing to their rhythm. You've entered their world. The Stoics called this giving your inner citadel to another. You surrender the calm of your mind just to prove a point. But here's what wisdom teaches. Your calm is more precious than being right. Your dignity more valuable than the last word. After 60, your emotional landscape becomes more sensitive. Not because you're weaker, but because you're wiser. You know now that one toxic conversation can ruin your appetite. One shouting match can disturb your sleep. One heated exchange can echo for days. So what do? You learn the art of distance, not avoidance, not coldness, but measured detachment. You see the person causing harm, and instead of fighting them, you step around them. You let them burn themselves out in their own fire. You stay grounded. You stay clear. You stay you. You realize that protection isn't just physical, it's emotional, and that you owe no one access to your peace. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, choose not to be harmed, and you won't be. It's not about letting people walk over you. It's about not giving them the tools to reach your center. You build boundaries, not walls, but gates. You decide who walks through and who stays outside. And when someone tries to bait you, through gossip, insult, or provocation, you don't grab the hook. You smile, you breathe, you walk away. Because after 60, your life should no longer be shaped by other people's storms. It should be shaped by your inner weather, calm, steady, grounded. You've fought enough battles. Now it's time to win without fighting, not with silence born from fear, but with quiet strength born from wisdom. A strength that says, I don't need to prove I'm right. I don't need to explain myself to everyone. I've earned my peace, and I will protect it. That's not weakness. That's not indifference. That's power. And in that power you become untouchable, not because you fight harder, but because you no longer fight at all. Part 5. The one who refuses to argue is the most dangerous. There's a certain kind of person who makes the entire room pause when they enter, not because they speak loudly, but because they don't need to speak at all. They don't shout. They don't defend. They don't rush to react. They simply remain still. And that stillness is precisely what makes others uneasy. You see, the person who often argues is easy to read. Push the right emotional button, and they reveal themselves. They expose their limits, their fears, their ego. But the one who doesn't argue, they're different. They're a fortress with no doors. No one knows what they're thinking. No one can find their weak spots. No one dares provoke them because they cannot predict the next move. This isn't coldness. It's inner discipline. They don't let emotions run the show. They don't walk into battles that aren't worth their energy. And when they do speak, just one sentence is enough to silence a room, because their words aren't born from ego. They come from deep observation. Their words are not a reaction. They are a verdict. They arrive late, but they strike with precision. No theatrics, no excess. Just truth so clear that it can't be denied. The one who refuses to argue isn't silent because they have nothing to say. They're silent because they understand. What truly holds value does not need to scream for attention. Real strength doesn't live in noise. It lives in control. The person who can't be dragged into emotional games is the one you should watch out for. After 60, when you no longer feel the need to please everyone, when you've lived through enough noise, enough drama, you begin to understand saying nothing at the right time is worth more than 1,000 clever rebuttals. You no longer need to win the argument, because the real victory is keeping your peace. And sometimes your quiet presence, that calm, unmoved stance, is the most powerful statement you can make. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to live on my own terms, grounded, composed, and unshaken. Part 6. Silence is the highest form of influence. Observe the greatest leaders, the most brilliant generals, or the most seasoned negotiators. They all share one thing in common. They rarely argue. They are not provoked by cheap attacks. They do not waste energy on pointless back and forths. They do not rush to defend their opinions even when they know they're right, because they understand a simple but profound truth. The greatest influence doesn't come from the loudest voice, but from the quietest presence. In the world of strategy, silence is not retreat. It is a deliberate pause to observe. It is a calculated step back to gain higher ground. When you remain silent, you allow others to reveal themselves. When you don't react, you force your opponent to guess, to doubt, and often to unravel themselves. While they flail, you remain still, steady as a mountain. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The wise man does not need to say much. His calmness is already a lesson." Silence is a subtle form of power. It doesn't demand attention, but it leaves an impression. It doesn't fight for the last word, yet it causes others to lower their voices in respect. Think about it. The people you respect most in life likely aren't the loudest, most persuasive talkers. They're the ones who are composed, insightful, and unpredictable. Their silence makes you lean in when they finally speak. And that silence isn't emptiness. It's discipline in abundance. And after 60, this becomes one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. The freedom from needing to prove. The serenity of not needing to win. The wisdom to show up, only when it matters and only in the way that matters. Silence, when used with intention, shields you from unnecessary conflict, preserves your emotional energy, and elevates your presence to one of quiet authority. The wise do not try to change others with arguments. They live rightly, and they let their silence create a ripple of deep influence around them. So, if you've ever felt less powerful because you chose not to speak, remember this. Silence is not the absence of influence. It is the deepest, most lasting form of it, and the one no one can argue with. In real life, calmness is not a luxury. It is a priceless asset. It protects you from needless conflicts and quietly shapes how others treat you. Let's look around. In the workplace, the person who constantly argues is often seen as reactive and easily manipulated, but the one who steps back, remains composed and picks their battles, that person is remembered for wisdom, vision, and quiet authority. Not because they lacked arguments, but because they chose tranquility as their power. In love, and especially within family, arguments rarely solve anything. They leave emotional wounds. They widen the distance. Winning a debate doesn't guarantee closeness, but the one who listens, who steps back when emotions run high, who values connection over control, that person shows emotional maturity and true strength. After 60, it's no longer about winning. It's about protecting harmony and connection. On social media, where every word can be twisted and criticism flies with a single sentence, reaction is a trap. Those who fight every comment, who try to correct the world, often lose credibility, peace, and presence. But those who choose silence, who filter their responses, who don't get pulled into others' emotional storms, they become respected, stable, quietly impactful. Stoicism doesn't teach us to be indifferent. It teaches us to master ourselves, so that we don't become victims of other people's emotions. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, once said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." The strong do not need to argue to prove who they are. Their calm is their answer. Their silence is their most powerful message. In Stoicism, silence is not avoidance. It is a strategy to protect your mind, to avoid spending energy on what doesn't matter, and to teach others that you cannot be easily provoked or easily read. And the most beautiful part, silence gives you something nothing else can: sovereignty over yourself. You've lived through most of life. You've had your share of debates, of needing to be understood, of angers that eventually faded. Now ask yourself, is anything still worth trading your inner peace for? If the answer is no, then perhaps it's time to walk a new path, a path of purposeful stillness, a mindset that is neither defensive nor easily provoked, a way of living where you don't need to raise your voice, because your composure already quiets the room. From this day forward, if someone tries to anger you, to pull you into a war of words, remember, you don't have to enter. Just stay silent, walk away, and smile. Because you know this. Let tranquility be your legacy. Not sharp comebacks, not the arguments you won, but the way you lived, gently, wisely, and firmly rooted in yourself. You don't need everyone to understand you. You just need to understand yourself. And if possible, let your silence be a small light in a world full of noise. If this message spoke to your heart, even in a small way, please consider supporting this channel by clicking like, subscribe, and the bell icon. Not for the numbers, but so that this kind of peaceful, thoughtful content reaches more people who may need it. Those who feel alone, overwhelmed, or simply in search of a little stillness in a noisy world. And if you know someone who might benefit from today's story, send it to them, like a quiet letter, gently passed from hand to hand. Thank you for your presence. Your time, your attention, and your quiet reflection mean more than you know.